The photos we'd uncovered provided evidence that the Thai military were towing refugees out to sea. Our sources stressed they did give these men food and water. The Thailand's Prime Minister, who recently came to power, says the practice is wrong and the government is investigating.
I believe that at times when there is, as I said, a lot of pressure in terms of the numbers of these people coming in, there are attempts, I think, to try to let these people drift to other shores. I have asked whether people are aware of such practices. The one thing that is clear is that when these practices do occur, it is done on the understanding that there is enough food and water supplied.
But I was still concerned about what happened to the men in these photos. We'd been told they were towed out to sea on the 19th of January, but they hadn't been seen since. But then we got news of a boatload of Rohingya who'd come ashore in Indonesia, hundreds of kilometres to the south of Thailand. Could this be the same boat in the photos we've been given? We travelled to the Indonesian port of Idi, where we were told a fishing boat had found a group of half-starved Rohingya drifting in a boat far out to sea. And this was the boat they arrived in. It looked exactly the same as the one in the photos, even down to the distinctive planking on the side. We found some of the Rohingya men in the local hospital. They were covered in scars and claimed they were beaten while being detained by the Thai authorities, who, according to them, finally towed them out to sea and cut them adrift. The Thai Prime Minister insists there was no abuse meted out by Thai forces, but when I showed the Rohingya the photos, they recognised the beach on Koh Sai Deng, the island where they'd been detained. Their accounts were confusing. Different men gave different dates, different numbers of Rohingya on their boat. But all the men we spoke to claimed they'd been beaten in Thailand, and all indicated they'd been towed back out to sea. Rahmat Ullah spoke Malay and appeared to be a sort of leader of the group. He claimed 22 men on the boat died.
No engine, no water, no food.
He told me their situation was desperate. Somehow he fell overboard but was rescued by a fisherman. He says, "I'm very grateful. If it weren't for him, I thought I would die in the sea." Muzakir is the fisherman who found him, by chance, 100 kilometres out to sea. He says, "When I first spotted him, I didn't think it was a person. I thought it was a fish or some sort of rubbish." Rahmat was so grateful because Musakir not only saved him, but also found the refugees' boat and towed them all to shore. Rahmat, like the others, knows they almost never made it. But after we left, an aid worker who works with the Rohingya showed us evidence that suggests Rahmat may have been more than just a leader of this group. The aid worker, who declined to go on camera for fear of being unable to return to Myanmar, claims several Rohingya recognised Rahmat's photo and insisted he organised their escape by boat, that he was part of a group of people smugglers who charged these men hundreds of dollars to escape Myanmar. Rahmat says he has no connection to people smugglers, he was just seeking a better life. But Indonesian investigators are looking into who organised the boat. The Indonesian foreign minister says there's a strong assumption that these men are victims of people smuggling.
Trafficking in persons atau people smuggling.
The UN's refugee agency confirmed many Rohingya are persuaded to board boats by unscrupulous people smugglers.
There are actually brokers who go around soliciting for people to get on these boats, and the brokers paint, wonderful pictures of life in Malaysia, because Malaysia is where they're usually trying to get to. They paint wonderful pictures of how life is in Malaysia. You can go there, you can work, you can earn money, send money home to your family, and a lot of people fall for it because they're just so desperate.
But all too often the boats the smugglers use are ill-equipped for long voyages. This footage, taken by the Indian Coast Guard, shows what appears to be a group of Rohingya being rescued off the coast of the Andaman Islands. These refugees, like other groups, also claim they'd been abandoned by the Thai military.
The condition of those men on that boat, who had been at sea for about 2 weeks, was truly horrific. You know, these men were in, they were skeletal. You know, their boat was on the verge of sinking. It was filled with, you know, human waste and seawater up to their hips. You know, I mean, that someone would put someone in at risk of that sort of treatment is, you know, beyond belief.
With such terrible risks faced at sea, I wondered why the Rohingya kept taking these boats. Surely word must have spread that these journeys were simply too dangerous. Well, you only have to look at the way most Rohingya are living to see why they're willing to gamble with their lives. Simply put, they're so desperate to escape terrible poverty and persecution. This is one of the Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh, right on the border with Myanmar. The grim daily grind of life in the camps is starkly highlighted by these striking photos. Squalid conditions endured by tens of thousands of stateless people in sprawling shanty towns. But human rights activists say inside Myanmar, the Rohingya have to cope with much worse.
Things like forced relocation, forced conscription, forced labor, these things are exacerbated for the Rohingyas. And in addition, they suffer from what is really systemic discrimination, systemic persecution. Things, for example, like not being able to marry outside of their ethnicity, very strict restrictions on movement, the inability to work for the government, to hold jobs as civil servants. They're summarily disenfranchised. They're not able to vote. They're not even held to be citizens.
Our attempts to get an on-camera interview with the Myanmar authorities were unsuccessful, but a letter to the press and diplomats signed by Yi Mint-ong, the Myanmar Consul General in Hong Kong, gives an idea of how the Myanmar government views the Rohingya. It argues the Rohingya are not from Myanmar because of the colour of their skin. The letter says, in reality, Rohingya are neither Myanmar people nor Myanmar's ethnic group. You will see in the photos that their complexion is dark brown. The complexion of Myanmar people is fair and soft, good looking as well. He quips that the Rohingya are as ugly as ogres.
Amnesty International also has evidence of military orders given in the early part of this decade, coming from the very top, that describes the Rohingyas as not human.
It's that kind of endemic racism that drove Abdul Karam to flee Myanmar. He lives in this tiny room in Bangkok, one of the estimated 20,000 Rohingya who's escaped persecution to make a new life in Thailand. He works selling flat bread. Abdul says life here is immeasurably better than it was in Myanmar, where he says his land was taken by the junta and where he claims soldiers forced him to work without wages and beat him. He says, I was not able to walk because of being too exhausted. I thought I would die, definitely. First the guy beat me, and then he used the bottom of the gun to hit into my face. I became immediately unconscious. We could not independently confirm his claims, but he did show us this scar he says he got when he was beaten by soldiers in Myanmar. The junta has refused to comment on the claims. After the break, we find out how new boatloads of Rohingya are now being treated differently, getting their day in court rather than being handled by the army. And we hear more from Thailand's Prime Minister, who's leading an investigation into the treatment of the Rohingya.